Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. This is a space where we seek to create and cultivate healthy conversations between those things we geek out on and the philosophical and theological questions that often arise out of our fandoms. Like, what does it mean to be human? What makes a hero? What makes a villain? How do the stories and narratives we geek out on shape how we live in the world? We are your priest to the geeks. We aren't all ordained, but we see ourselves as mediators at the intersection of geek culture and going deeper in our faith. We don't always have to agree, but we do respect each other, and we see everyone as a beloved child of God. Everyone geeks out on something, so come geek out with us and enjoy the show.
You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
How did we handle the major deaths of Star Wars Rebels? We're going to be asking this question and a lot more on today's episode of Systematic Geekology. We are the Priests of the Geeks. Guys, I'm your host, Christian Ashley, joined by a magnificent assemblage of people. I mean, minus John, but there's that too. Kevin Schaeffer, how's it going?
Great, Christian. How about you?
I'm all right. Got a sick burn to John right in the beginning of the video. Exactly what I wanted.
We all
John
burn each other.
Kill John.
Is also here. How's it going, John?
It's going great. I love being verbally abused by you.
And if you're on YouTube, you can see exactly what I do to John under his name. But we were also joined here today by a special guest. You've heard his voice before, but maybe you've also seen him on YouTube as well. Evan Garcia. How's it going, Evan?
Hello there. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. I am very much excitable about this episode.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is going to be a fun one. I'm looking forward to this. But before we actually get into there, guys, what have you been geeking out on recently?
Well, I'll start it out. We've been geeking out on Fushigi Yuji. It's the next anime that we are making our way through with the family. We are currently, I think, on disc 2 of the DVD set. So it's really exciting. I don't remember half of this stuff, and also they added a lot of humor into the anime because I never watched the anime. I read the manga, but so it's kind of fresh to see the director's take on translating it to the screen.
Yeah, and the age of filler too. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Anyone else?
Yeah, the other day I got to see. It's a new Christopher Reeve documentary that it's actually really the first production through DC Studios. It's called Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. It was only playing in theaters on Saturday, and then it's one more day this week. I think on Christopher Reeve's birthday, and then it'll be on Max probably within a month or so. I'm not sure of the exact release date, but well worth a watch. It is emotional, especially. I mean, not just if you know anything about Christopher Reeve's story, but then when you combine that with all the stuff with Robin Williams in there too, I was just like in the theater, like getting very emotional there. But it is very powerful. Highly recommend. So between that and then the Penguin pilot, it was a DC weekend for me.
Oh yeah,
I quite enjoyed the Penguin premiere. I'm really excited.
Solid first episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
Evan, how about yourself?
Yeah, I'm on the Rings of Power, finishing up season 1. Because my wife really wants to watch season 2 with me, so she's like, "Hurry up! What are you doing?" So I'm like, "Yeah, cool." So I'm digging it. Yeah, I'm liking it. It's fun to see just new Lord of the Rings again. It's cool.
Okay. I actually earlier today finished for the first time Assassin's Creed 3. Ultimately, I would say I enjoyed it, but it's real difficult going from the modern controls down to what they were doing back in the day. Can't even crouch. But hey, you got to relearn how to play the game. That's fine. So if you guys have not been listening, how have you do that? But we are covering today the major deaths of Star Wars Rebels. Now, before we actually head that way, let us go into what Star Wars Rebels is and isn't. But as part of that, I do want to give a little announcement. We're not covering every single death that shows up on the show. We're focusing on a select few. And Evan, I know you wanted to have one to herald at the very beginning. So have at it.
Well, yeah, there was one death that stood out to me when I first saw it, and they've kind of set it up for that character, and that character's kind of lived up to his name. It's the very first, I think, is one of the first deaths in the show, but it's where Chopper just kind of passive aggressively kicks over a stormtrooper to its death, and just kind of out of nowhere, like, wait a minute, what? Wait, that guy's dead now. I'm like, I was just like, oh, and then they set that up, and now a Chopper's legendary for that kind of stuff now.
You're used to R2 like repairing ships and everything, and then you have his like dark cousin out there just taking people out.
Everyone's favorite little mini war criminal.
Mm-hmm.
Has the highest count or highest death count in all of Star Wars. All hail Chopper.
I don't know. Luke's probably got him beat. There was that Death Star thing.
Oh yeah, indeterminate amount of people on the space station.
I don't know. I haven't watched Force Awakens in forever. Who got the kill shot on the planet? How many First Order people were there?
Oh, that's true.
That's a good question.
Feel bad for like the Imperial janitors who are just like sweeping up the hallway.
I was ready. Yes, thank you.
They're dead.
We need a Clerks 4 now to solve this.
Absolutely.
All right. So as promised, we're going to be discussing first, like, what is Star Wars Rebels? Anyone want to take that away and explain, like, what the premise of the show is, how it came to be, and stuff like that?
I can take a stab at that. So Rebels is a sequel series to the Clone Wars, also developed by Dave Filoni, set in between really the prequels and then before New Hope is showing. So it's before the rebellion is actually official. At the beginning of the show, the Rebel Alliance is not officially formed. It's in its early conception, but it is not. The Galactic Civil War has not begun quite yet. This is a few years before the Battle of Yavin, and Rebels follows a group of outcasts and kind of a ragtag crew that are eventually become part of the Alliance, but initially are just kind of outsiders of the Empire trying to survive. The main sort of Luke figure is also an orphan. The one who becomes his Jedi Master is a survivor of Order 66. But really they're scavengers and rebels and what's up, man? What's up? But eventually they come to be part of the Alliance, and it ran 4 seasons. This was running like before Clone Wars had gotten its 7th and final season on Disney Plus, which happened years later. So that's the kind of is like Rebels ended before that season. So before we got the official version of Clone Wars. It's an interesting timeline. We can talk about that as well. But it is a great show. It really, whereas Clone Wars really adds a lot to the prequels and mirrors the tone of that, Rebels feels more aesthetically like the original trilogy and builds directly into that. But they're very connected, and you see characters overlap and storylines, and it's this really another great expansion of the Star Wars universe.
Okay. Yeah, well said. Anyone else want to add anything to that?
I would say A+ on the description, because if you ask me to do it, we'd be on 10 bunny trails by now.
Okay, perfect. Well done, Kevin. So, what was our introduction to Star Wars Rebels?
For me, was that excitement of that era where we had the new Star Wars coming, which is crazy to me that it's already 10 years ago. But that was that hype of like, we are getting new Star Wars. And this was the first thing to come out of Disney that was going to be in the new era. And I remember thinking, man, they took my Clone Wars away for this, really? So, and then I remember seeing the concept art. It was like TIE Fighter, I think, or something like that, and it was in the style of the Ralph Quarry art. And they said that the style was going to be in like a live or a fully animated kind of like bringing to life the stuff from Ruff. Yeah, so he was there. They were doing that, and I think it was impressive that they were able to execute that, at least from the first season.
John or Kevin?
John,
I
I'll
was
let
gonna
you go.
say, at the risk of ostracizing myself, I saw this just a couple of years ago on Disney Plus before I'd seen Clone Wars. So I hadn't seen Clone Wars at this time, the animated show.
Cool.
So this was, I feel like it was just a great reintroduction for me into the Star Wars universe when I started getting back into Star Wars. And it did have a feel of the original trilogy because it kind of focuses on a Luke-style figure raising up a young Jedi Padawan. It's kind of, you get that feel like they're the last of their kind, and they're trying to exist in this Imperial-controlled galaxy, and they're, end up becoming part of something bigger than themselves, and you get that mystical sense of the Force like you did in the original trilogy, because in Clone Wars it kind of lost its, I'm not saying it lost itself, but it was definitely not on the mystical side. It was more on the war side and the political side of the prequels.
Actually, I'm kind of a hybrid of the two in that I remember watching the pilot like years ago. I guess I'm trying to remember how I got to, like, if we had Disney XD or what, because like I really haven't watched like a lot of cable in years, just because like it's easier for me to stream stuff, and I don't remember if they ever added this one on Netflix. They did have Clone Wars on there, but I also watched all of it on Disney Plus, just in the last few years, and so at that point it had been out for a while, but I remember liking the pilot back in the day. Like, I feel like it was kind of a Firefly vibe to it. And John, it's a good point too. I think like Clone Wars definitely had a lot of the mysticism and expansions on the Force mythology, but it was very like war centric. This one, I think what the appeal to is that it follows the same group of characters throughout the series. Whereas, like, yes, Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka are, I would say, the main players in Clone Wars, but then you get episodes with like kind of random side characters and like kind of go over all the place, and it's cool in a way. I mean, Clone Wars is great and does really interesting things, but I also like following the same group here throughout, having kind of different villains each season, and yeah, I just really like the storytelling throughout. And I chose specifically, when I did watch all of it, I chose not to just binge it straight through. I kind of took my time with it for several months because I really wanted it to be more of a journey. As good as it was, I didn't want to just like, rush through it. So I took a little bit of time, but yeah, especially like during the COVID years and all that, it was just a great series to really invest in. So a little bit of a hybrid there.
Okay. Yeah, I watched a couple episodes around the time it first came out, but they had a lot going against them in my mind, because that's around the time it was announced that Disney was killing the old canon and introducing their new one. And I am a huge fan of what came before. It's not all perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but there was a lot of characters I really loved that I wanted to see on screen one day, and now that was never going to happen. So, and the first season's rough. I mean, you're introducing the concept and everything. You're getting the feel for it. So it's not as good as other seasons. So that was stacked against it too. So I stopped. And then, like 5 or 6 years later, my brother started watching it, and he was saying, "Christian, you got to watch this. They pick up on these things from Clone Wars and all this." And I'm like, I don't know. But at the end of the day, I mostly trust his judgment. And it turned out he was right. I was in a better place. I was able to get into it more and fell in love with these characters and what they were exploring, the birth of the rebellion, in a way that was a lot of really good fun.
And Thrawn probably brought you in, huh?
Oh, absolutely.
Good old Grand Admiral.
So, yeah. So the whole premise of this episode we're doing is that focusing on the major deaths that occur within this, by the way, a children's series. But I ask you all, is death a necessary storytelling tool for an effective story? Does that need to be there for something to be a better story?
I would say it doesn't have to be there, but it does create stakes and also ground you in the reality of the characters, that they are finite and that there is a consequence of either they could fail or they could succeed, but either way, their story might end and not be fulfilled, and it's a creates almost like a fear sometimes. It adds a lot to stories, especially ones that are like these set in wars.
For sure.
I think it definitely depends on the story, but yeah, particularly in something like this that is set during a very dark time in the galaxy, and it, like you said, Christian, technically it's a kid show, but is not afraid to tackle real stuff. And and I have to bring up a comparison, especially because Dave Filoni is the creator of these, but Avatar: Last Airbender, which is another one I grew up on, and I'm glad I got to experience as a kid, and grew up with it. But like one of the most emotional episodes and the best is like you knew Iroh had a son who died previously, but with that episode when he's like reflecting on that and he sings, lamenting over it and sings like it just like rips your heart out, but it's not in an emotionally manipulative way. It's just showing, like John, like you said, it's a real thing that we deal with. And I think like sometimes in animation and in kid storytelling, it's a good way to bring up issues like that through storytelling and to introduce to kids and to younger viewers that yes, this is a reality and this is something we have to wrestle with. And yeah, something like this show handles it really well.
Yeah, I don't know in the circles you guys were running in, but in mine, in the Star Wars land that I was in online and stuff, it was basically common knowledge to think that if they weren't showing up in the movies, in the original trilogy, they would have to die beforehand. So I thought that was an interesting way to play with the characters. Like, oh, these characters, you know where the broader story goes, but you don't know the details of these characters yet. So I thought that was cool to play with. Like, oh, okay. And then now post the release and the 10 years on, now we see the end of their stories. And yes, some of them did include death, literal death, but some they had to die in a different way later on and different ways like that. So I thought that was interesting, and that the death was looming on these characters.
Evan, it's funny you say that because just a quick note. So I saw the original Clone Wars movie in theaters when I was like 14, and they introduced this character Ahsoka, and I'm like, okay, she's a Padawan to Anakin, and I'm like, but this is set before Episode 3. She's never mentioned in Revenge of the Sith. I'm like, I just assumed. I'm like, wow, this is she's pretty cool, but I'm like, she's gonna die, right? Like, I mean, like, and that's what I'm glad I was very wrong there, and they had, lo and behold, like, she's actually one that lives the longest. But yeah, when you're connecting stuff like that to a larger mythos and canon, you have all those questions in your head too.
Yeah. I'll agree with my co-host here. I think it depends on a story. For a story like this, where, as mentioned previously, we are in a galactic war, against a very oppressive regime. If your characters don't die at some point in time, you're not writing to the story you're presenting. Now, that's not to say that they should be dying right and left. I don't want that. But you got to consider what story you're telling. If I don't expect, if I'm watching Magic School Bus, for Miss Frizzle to use the Magic School Bus, go back in time, say, all right, Phoebe, here's an M1 Garand rifle. We're storming the beaches of Normandy. Hope you survived the experience.
There's some fan fiction.
In the same way, when I watch something like The Walking Dead or Game of Thrones, like that was a good one, John. I expect people to die, but then my care kind of ends for a bit when people just keep dying and there's no like resolution, or it doesn't feel earned or anything. So something like this, death matters in the story, and we prove that with some of these characters, but it isn't oppressive. It's been like, hey, this is something that actually happens in a galactic civil conflict, or when you are a resistance force against a much larger enemy, chances are not everyone's going to make it. So I really appreciate how they handled it. There's no blood and gore and guts thrown everywhere. Once again, this is primarily a children's show, but there's enough to not treat them like children. They treat them a little better than that.
Yeah.
All right. So what do you say we actually get into the actual deaths of the show? Now, the first one's a kind of weird one because technically she dies a long time, well, a little over a decade before the show, but it's the circumstances of her death that make her character matter in the show, and that being Luminara Unduli, a Jedi Master who we find survived initially Order 66. So who wants to describe her death before the story and how it was used against our heroes?
Wasn't it the Grand Inquisitor was like sending visions or something like that, and Kanan was picking up on it, and there was like just a trail to trap them, kind of a morbid thing. Like,
yeah, it wasn't visions; it was rumors that they were like kind of like settling into being like, "Hey, she might still be alive.
wow,
Don't
okay,
go to the prison that she's at and save her or anything. That'd be bad."
gotcha. Yeah, I remember seeing it, and I was like, okay, so they are not pulling any punches, and I was like, that's one way to get the heroes in. I was like, all right, right on.
It's also just from a storytelling angle, a really unique way, very like with the timing of how she's brought in and this plays out toward the end of season one. Her being the Jedi that is like you said, they lure and then trap them there because Luminara was the Jedi Master of Boris, who is Ahsoka's best friend growing up, who ended up becoming a traitor. So that is like, and was really the reason that Ahsoka left the Jedi Order. Go back and watch that storyline of Clone Wars. But yeah, this leads to the big season one finale and the battle with the Grand Inquisitor. And at the end of that season is when Ahsoka shows up. So it is a really interesting connection there to like and foreshadowing.
Yeah. And a tease as to what happened to Barris, because we straight up didn't know. We just didn't know what happened to Barris.
Yeah.
John, do you have anything you want to add?
I was going to say it was definitely a macabre moment where you realize that the show is more than just like, unicorns and rainbows for children with Star Wars. It's a more mature, with real intrigue and subterfuge, and they're really trying to, kill these heroes. The Empire does give it a little bit more gravitas and weight to their evil mechanics.
Yeah, it's such a nasty, evil plan, and it's perfect for who we're working with here. It's like you give them that little bit of hope in a galaxy that has very little of that. Maybe one of the Jedi survived. And not only that, a Jedi Master survived, but she's in prison. Wouldn't it be a huge morale boost to break into that prison, take her out, and now you have a Jedi Master on your side, only for it to be revealed that's exactly what they wanted you to think, and you fell for it like a bunch of suckers.
Dang, so good.
And it's masterfully played. It's very well done. But that actually kind of brought this up in my mind. I know a lot of people, one of their criticisms against Order 66 is that in their mind, too many Jedi survive. Is that something? What do you guys think about that? Is that a valid criticism?
I was just about to. Well, here, go ahead first.
I was going. You already started, and then I'll say my piece in a second. Good.
I was gonna say, like, I saw this meme the other day that had Buzz Lightyear from Toy Story 2 in the box there, and it was like Order 66, and on the bottom it it pulls out and has all the buzzes on the toy out, and it was like Disney Star Wars, like like how many they've had. So that's why I was thinking about this of like if Rebels were released today, this would be a really big twist because at first you'd be like, oh, another Order 66 survivor. It's not that like big surprise, and then you find out, oh no, she is dead. That would have been an interesting twist there, but I think it's one of those like even dating back to pre-Disney and all that. Like there was the Force Unleashed game. Like there were Order 66 survivors spread out throughout the galaxy. It wasn't like they just every Jedi died right away, and they put out the signal in Episode 3 to warn surviving Jedi. So I don't think it's too far-fetched to have it. Like it can be overused as like a storytelling device just to bring back like legacy characters that you wanted to see. But So I'm of two minds there, but I don't think it's like while it was this genocidal order, I don't think it's contradicts that there were survivors throughout, because I mean look at Kanan, of course.
Evan, John?
I was going to say, I don't think it's far-fetched that there were a lot of survivors. I mean, the Order itself had thousands of members, and if Obi-Wan reached, just a certain percentage of them and they were able to hide away, I mean, there would have been numerous survivors, at least in the very beginning, especially, and that's what brought the need of the Inquisitors, because they needed to hunt them down, and they couldn't trust Stormtroopers to do it because they had to have someone, a little bit more trained in the Force in order to combat Jedi that had survived. And it doesn't bother me. I think it can seem silly sometimes when you have like an overabundance and like, oh, there's another Order 66 survivor, but it like the new Jedi Survivor game or Fallen Order, where Malicos is like a 66 survivor, but he got screwed up in the head. But I kind of like that plot. I mean, as long as it's not like overdone.
Right.
Yeah. Evan?
This is a topic that had me this was a topic that had me going for a while. Like, it makes for good memes, but it's true. Like, we were taking the line that Yoda says on his deathbed, "The last of the Jedi you will be." I think we were all taking it literally. And it's taken us a few years. It's taken me, and I think the collective and the fandom in general, to learn, hey, we can't take that stuff completely literal. Like it makes sense that some people would survive, and I think that's okay, because we've gotten some great stories out of it. We've like the Fallen Order games are great. This story is great. Like, so it was a big one for me that I had to reframe the way that I saw the original trilogy, basically.
Yeah.
I also think about that line too. And go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Yeah, that line too is like, in context, Yoda doesn't know about anyone else as far as we're aware. So of course he thinks Luke still that's left. So go ahead, Kevin.
True.
I was gonna say, well, yeah, he doesn't know, and also the singular and plural of Jedi are the same. So it's like, so the idea of like, okay, the Jedi Order is dead at that point. That doesn't mean there aren't survivors out there. So linguistics and Star Wars terminology adds for more context there.
Yeah. I completely agree with you guys. Like, when you start thinking about it, well, the purpose of Order 66 was to wipe them out, so there shouldn't be that many. Well, yeah, that's the purpose of it, but does every plan go to fruition 100%? No. And even depending on how you number the amount of Jedi there were before the war, there's some say 100,000, some say 10,000. I tend to go with the lower number. That makes a little more sense to me. If 1%, and don't trust me on my math here, do it yourselves. If 1% survive Order 66, that's 100 Jedi.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
That's fine with me. And that's assuming that only 1% survive. So, yeah, I get the criticism, because it retroactively kind of makes Order 66 not as effective as it seems to be, as what we're shown. But when you apply a little logic to it, it's fine, because there's some Jedi who never were fighting on the front lines. There was some Jedi who were fighting on the front lines but used mercenaries instead of clones, as we see in Force Unleashed. Like,
that's true.
There are ways for people to survive.
And there's another Force Unleashed, a connection here too with one of the characters, which I thought was interesting, because I don't think they were thinking that, but there are some parallels. So, yeah.
All right, we're good to move on to our next death.
Yeah,
that of course being around the same time of the Grand Inquisitor. So, who wants to take it away?
I would just say this is a classic villain death, where the Grand Inquisitor falls to death before its ship is destroyed in a final battle. But I would say, Christian, what you were saying earlier, how like the show had some growing pains at the beginning, and it is kind of figuring out what it wants to be. I think the season 1 finale is really just a big bombastic, like, oh, this is where it gets real. Where I really love the duel between Kanan and Grand Inquisitor. I think it's one of the classics. It's a great battle scene. The rest of the finale sets up so much for future seasons. Of course, bringing in Vader, bringing back Ahsoka. It's just like, whoa, here we are. But yeah, I mean, for this guy is also I like too that instead of having one big bad throughout the entire series, they did kind of like more a central villain each season. Granted, Thrawn of course becomes like the big one from season 3 on. But even then, that's only 2 seasons. I like that. The Grand Inquisitor was not there. I think it would have been tiresome to have him throughout the entire series. He needed to be like, one season villain, and then has an epic death there. And it's also, I think with his death, it's more about Kanan in this moment, because this is where at this point, yes, he's started to form a mentor-apprentice relationship with Ezra. He's starting to find like hope again in some ways, but this is the moment where he realizes, oh, I cannot like hide any longer. I have there is a huge threat out there to what remains of the Jedi, and not just the Jedi, but the entire galaxy. And it's time that I have to get back into war mode and fulfill my destiny. And this is the beginning of that in many ways.
That is very interesting comparison, because I'm just now realizing how the Grand Inquisitor's death and his badass line is a foreshadowing of Kanan's death almost, and to what it does to the other characters. Yeah. I just interesting.
Okay. John?
I was going to say the tone of the show really changes once the Grand Inquisitor gets involved, and especially when he kills those 2 mooks who are kind of like comic relief from Lothal. Like in the beginning, you see those 2 Imperial people who are just like ridiculous. You're like, oh, this is a kid show. But once he like cuts the 2 of their heads off, you're like, okay, this show just took a 180.
Yeah, and too, like, the reason he dies is because he chooses to at the end, because he knows survival means punishment from Vader. And as if Vader needs to be hyped up anymore as a threat, that solidifies it in this series for those who, for some reason, this is their first encounter with Star Wars. They know, oh, this Vader guy is a huge deal, because it's better for me to die right now than to suffer with him and live.
Yeah, that's intense. That's intense.
Also, putting this in the context of the Obi-Wan show, which of course came years later, this guy's already came this close to death before, and he's like, yeah, I don't really want to go there again. I think it's my time.
That's right. Okay. How do we feel about those deaths? Now that we're talking about it, sorry. If we can take a tangent there like that.
You mean like the fake out ones? Kind of
Yeah. I can't stand it. I want them to matter, and the more times you do that, the less lethal lightsabers end up being. And that really annoys me. And so I say, if you stab in the right part, no, someone shouldn't die because you're cauterizing the wound. But the stress of it may send someone to death or have a heart attack or something like that. But when it keeps happening, I raise my eyes in suspicion.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing about it. It's like one thing if they do that once and like, okay, you can maybe say like, well, it was a kind of super powered character and they had some armor or whatever like that, and they were able to heal. Right? But they did it in Obi-Wan alone. They did it with both Grand Inquisitor and Reva, and then they did a year later in Ahsoka. They did it with Sabine. And those guys are just like, okay, does getting stabbed directly in a critical part of the body with a lightsaber not meaning anything anymore?
Yeah. Qui-Gon's probably really pissed off. Like, what the heck?
Right. Like,
Force Ghost standing there with the hands on the hips.
Exactly.
It is. And that's exactly what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah, that was a good tangent to go on, because that's how death is handled differently.
But it ties into this though of like, I mean, for death to have like impact, it has to like be permanent. It has to be, and like they do it here, and like I feel like I know a lot of other. I mean, it happens in comics all the time too, but like, yeah, it just becomes an overdone thing when they just take away the meaning of it.
Yeah, good tangent, Evan.
All right.
So that brings us to our next segment, where we're going to be talking about the fake out death of Ahsoka Tano. So for a whole season more, we thought we didn't know what happened to her.
Mm-hmm.
And so, let's describe what leads up to this scenario to where we think she's gone.
The whole fulcrum thing, right? The whole mystery, like who's fulcrum and stuff. And that was a big, like, could it be her? I remember the podcast I was listening to. They were like they had dissected the dialogue, and they pulled out Ashley Eckstein's voice and everything, and they were like, "We found out it's Ahsoka." And then, lo and behold, that she did come back. I thought it was a good way to bring back the character, and I like what they did with it. I'm very much in tune with the post-Jedi kind of stuff for her. And I'm glad that we got to see that here. And that death plays a big part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think here it doesn't, like, going off on the conversation we just had of like overuse and like, it becomes frustrating when they just like say like, oh, well, James Hatton with a lightsaber doesn't mean anything anymore. But with this, like already, I think Ahsoka had an ethereal presence to her, and you could tell they were like, I mean, she wasn't the chosen one like Anakin, but there was something special about her journey and up until this point. And so, and then with like the world between worlds, it adds this whole new dimension to the Force, and it's just like, so that we hadn't seen that before, and it wasn't like, and it was just like, that was a really cool way to save her. But like, also it's like, yes, so she does like technically die in this duel with Vader, which is of course like such an emotional moment on its own, because this is master and apprentice reuniting, only like not terribly long after she's realized that Anakin is Vader and has to come to wrestle with that revelation. But yeah, and she's also been this lovable character, and like, you think she dies, but at the same time, I think there was always that like suspicion in fans that, I don't know, there's something happened here. There was a weird, like, almost that off camera kind of a that they like, you're like, she's got to be around somewhere, and they reveal. And so I think it works really well, and it really is this like, I mean, almost like a get off the white type thing to bringing her back. And I think it worked really well, and it works because it hasn't been overused too. It's not like they did that with a ton of characters. This like was a special thing, and like, we can get into more of the world between worlds, but I think
we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
John?
I was gonna say, this was like one of the most epic like duo episodes ever. With like, wasn't it like Darth Maul was there? They were part of this. There was like a Sith temple that they were infiltrating and researching, and it was a battle station that was about to get activated. And Darth Maul was there, and it was like this incredible like duel. It was just such an epic like couple of episodes that really.
And the way Vader comes in too.
Yeah, he's like floating on the TIE fighter.
Too.
And it's also like so much like going on in terms of like, it's not just like a good guy versus bad guy fight. It's like Darth Maul is after vengeance for himself and trying to reclaim everything, acquire the Sith holocron. He lures Ezra into helping him, even though, I mean, Ezra is like unaware of who he is and everything. And then, of course, Vader is just coming to wipe everyone out. Kanan, Ahsoka, Ezra, all that are just trying to survive. And then, of course, the reunion between Ahsoka and Vader is one of the best, and it's such a good duel. But there's so much tension and moving parts in that episode, and it's done so well.
Yes. Yeah, this is an extremely well done finale for the second season. Like we've mentioned, there's all these different groups coming together for different purposes on this region of Malachor, which, once again, like mentioned earlier, great reference to KOTOR 2, greatest video game of all time. Mm-hmm. And then we have this whole scenario where the reveal is given to Ahsoka. This whole time, she knows there's a Darth Vader. She knows Palpatine. She's met him. But who is this Vader guy? And in the midst of the fight, she sees his eye. And like the realization dawns on her. And I may be mixing up scenes, but she knows who he is and who's been killing their friends all these years. And there's a brokenness to her that she still has enough to fight, but there's that hesitancy of, this is my master. I may no longer be a Jedi, but this is the man who stuck by me the most out of anyone else. And this is what he's been reduced to. Man, if you don't know your Clone Wars, that's not going to make a lot of sense. But when you build up everything there, it means a whole lot more.
And with the context of, I don't want to spoil it for people, but what happens in the Ahsoka series, how she kind of knew he had that edge to him. So seeing this was like almost a validation, like, oh, I knew it. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew it. That completely devastated her. Like, oh, come on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So it's been mentioned earlier. Ahsoka does not actually die here.
Ahsoka
it happens off screen. What is it? I'm mixing up my seasons. Is it season 4 where they encounter the world between worlds for the first time?
Yeah.
Okay.
4.
Yeah. So she's missing for an entire season. So, the speculation is building. Did Vader capture her or something and try to make her an apprentice? Or what's going on here? What happened to Ahsoka? There's no body, so of course she's not dead. I mean, these are Star Wars rules. And then, unless you leave your body behind, but, those are only a select few who can do that. We have this moment where Ezra in the world between worlds is witnessing the fight. And would anyone like to explain the world between worlds before we go forward? What the heck it is?
I would say it's kind of like a ethereal, spiritual realm that exists between the plane of all things, and where everything is connected, and all time and all space are basically, there are pathways to every every event or every timeline that exists in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah. Which is precisely why Palpatine wanted it, because could you imagine someone like him in control of that?
Almost more frightening than the Infinity Gauntlet in the wrong hands.
Yeah. So as a result of him witnessing the fight, Ezra sees a moment where he is able to bring her back to him and prevents her from dying. So it's been an accusation thrown out against it since that episode first aired. But do you guys believe that the world between worlds is a deus ex machina? That being, of course, for anyone who doesn't know in the audience, a god in the machine, which is of a trope that would be used a lot in old Greek theater, where the heroes couldn't possibly win the day. So what would happen? A god would descend down from the stage and solve everything. So this is kind of the sense of, well, God himself had to intervene for something to go happy in this scenario. So what do you guys think?
I think it plays really well into the spiritual side of things and how they are always teaching them that everything is connected. It's more like the ultimatum, almost like the end of all things. And it just brings the whole spiritual side together, where it shows you in a real physical way how everything is connected, how you could go forward in time, back in time. All the events that have happened are, not that you can go mess with them, but that they are accessible, and you in this weird spiritual realm, and also that there's pathways between them, and that other creatures in the past had referenced things like this, and there's drawings of them, the Father, the Son, and there's a lot of lore about it. So it ties in the past Force users to the present Force users in this show.
I like that take. Yeah, I never thought of it like that.
Okay.
Kind of like the physical manifestation of the spiritual side of the Force. It's cool. Yeah,
I definitely agree with that. I think, and to counteract the Deus Ex Machina accusation, once they do learn about it, they don't use it to just go back and save everyone. They say when Ezra wants to save another character who we'll get to later. They say no, we can't, that's not what this is for, and and it's not a something bad happened, let's do a redo. That's not what it's for. I think John echoed it perfectly there. It is and it also connects to the Mortis saga really well. It's just this like another part of the Force mythology, but it's not like like we can just like throw death out the window.
Yeah, and kind of like the existence of this is an indictment, a further indictment against the Jedi, and that they didn't understand this Force that they said they wielded, that they're the ones chosen by it.
Yeah.
Because they know nothing about the father, son, and daughter. They know nothing about the world between worlds, and yet they say they're in charge. They say they understand everything. So there's that hubris there that they had just understood this. Maybe they could have been using it earlier in the past to affect good change in the world or something like that. But because they never bothered to look at it, nothing happens until we get to Ezra here, who uses it for good to bring Ahsoka out of there. So I would argue with how they utilize it, this is not a Deus Ex Machina. It's I know certain people out there. Yeah, certain people out there know Filoni loves Ahsoka, not romantically, but like she's his gal. He's been like watching over her character for over a decade, and like so, there's a certain like creator's pet scenario that kind of comes in that to play because he wants her to be in the story because he likes utilizing her in the story. So they would claim that's a cop out just because his favorite character was put in a situation she couldn't possibly survive. He had to invent something else to save her, but. Yeah, you can argue that, but at the end of the day, how it's utilized in a story is so much more than that, that I'm okay with how the events play. I'm okay with it being used in a way that we've never seen before in Star Wars to save someone else's life because you established the rules as well as possible and then utilize them according to that set of rules. And I kind of like Ahsoka, so I'd rather she be alive for the most part until it's actually her time to die. So I'm fine with this.
Trust. Yeah.
Yes.
I never made the connection with the Mortis. So there's a connection to the Mortis gods with the world between worlds.
Well, just in terms of like it, there are different things, but it's like Mortis is also this like spiritual realm kind of planet that have access to. Just in terms of like this whole like these Force ideas that we never saw in the movies and we never seen before, and it adds like depth to that. And then when like within the Ahsoka series, it expands on the Mortis gods and stuff there. So I just in terms of that, they like not a direct link in that regard, but in terms of like the expansion of the Force mythology.
Well, there was a direct link with the in season 4, the wall painting that they were looking at was a depiction of the father, son, and daughter, and that's how they entered into the world between worlds in season 4.
That's true. Yeah.
That's right.
It's very subtle compared to everything else. Yeah.
I remember being super excited about that. Like, oh, yeah, those. And then we didn't figure out anything from them.
Okay. Anything else for Ahsoka? Then let's get some light genocide. The Geonosian race. Not something I expected to see in my children's Star Wars cartoon. We have a set of episodes where who would like to explain what goes on for the Geonosian species?
Well, they're basically systematically eradicated by the Empire, and that's just a succinct way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't pick up on it at first. I was like, oh, wait, that's what they mean? I was like, oh, okay. they just took the raid to the guys, they're just gone.
Yeah. Kevin, anything you want to add?
I would just say it's like, okay, we were introduced to genocide from the beginning of Star Wars with Alderaan, but in that respect, we never saw the planet or the people or anything like that. The difference here is that we get so much more of like the culture, like starting back in the prequel movies and then going through here. So when you feel that more emotional connection, it's like because the Geonosians, obviously Geonosis was the planet that hosted the first battle of the Clone Wars, and they were the Separatist allies that helped initiate everything. And then once the Empire took over, like you said, just like systematically eradicate them. I think there are like probably like some who survive, but essentially their entire society and everything is wiped out. So it's quite brutal.
Yes. So we're effectively left with one Geonosian whose name they can't translate. They don't know the language. So Ezra just starts calling him Click Clack, who is holding the last surviving egg of a potential Geonosian queen, who, as we saw in earlier Clone Wars, was, how they control the Geonosians as a people and stuff like that. It's very, insect mentality. But along the way, we learn I think in the comics, in the Vader series, that they sterilized every last one of them. So even though she was born, she wasn't able to propagate the species again. So this is effectively an entire genocide against a species that the Empire would have, reason to not like, because they supplied a lot of the weapons that fought against the Republic in a day and fought against them as well. And also because it serves a further purpose of them working on part of the Death Star, of killing them off so that no one can leak the information to anyone else. So once again, it's Palpatine who is a master manipulator, a master planner, a very terrible person, mind you, but a very masterful manipulator who engages in genocide just because it's better for him that it's done. And that's in a children's show that is handled effectively in not a way that's not like, hey guys, killing other species is wrong. Like, no, there is no PSA at the end of the episode. It's like, hey, genocide, you shouldn't be doing that, kids. It's like, no, we live in worlds where this has happened, in a world where this has happened to other races that we're never going to names of, and some who barely survived. So I think this is a kid-friendly way of introducing that idea to them.
Yeah.
The Empire's bad, okay?
Don't join the Empire.
Yeah. Anything else for the Genosians?
Sad ending for them.
Like, I never liked them, but they don't deserve that.
It's like, it's always fun gunning them down in Battlefront, but I wasn't trying to wipe out their species. They were trying to shoot me.
I wouldn't be surprised if one shows up in like a video game, kind of how that had that assassin droid showed up in that game Outlaws currently. Maybe one will show up as like some sort of bounty hunter or something.
Okay.
Like he was off world trying to do something else and he came back to nothing.
Yeah. As someone who likes more hopeful endings, I wouldn't be opposed to something like that.
I was about to say, not that there would be many left, but it would be cool to see like some like off-world ones who maybe like formed a small colony somewhere else and kind
of like Steps people, the Lasat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Reminds me of Ender's Game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on from the Genosians, we have good old Gar Saxon. Who wants to go through what happens here?
It's been a minute since I've watched this one, but I did like recap earlier. But so Sabine, one of the main characters, is a Mandalorian, and they obviously there's long history with Mandalore. They've the Clone Wars and the Rebels, and at this point, she's kind of like been away from her family. She went to be become a bounty hunter and do all this stuff, and then Gar is in control at this point in the series, and he wields the Darksaber. And then series of events leads to a duel between him and Sabine, and that's how she comes to acquire it. And then he's killed by, is it Sabine's mother kills him? I can't remember.
Ursa.
Yeah.
Because Sabine is a moment of sparing his life in a very Star Wars hero kind of way. He tries to stab her in the back or something or shoot her, and Ursa takes him down.
Yeah, because I said like Mandalore's allegiance shifts kind of throughout, but at this point he's like Imperial loyalist, and so this represents a turning point for their culture when he dies. But it's and of course a big moment for Sabine. Kind of like coming to grips with her destiny too, and then wielding the Darksaber.
Yep. Anyone else?
I remember liking Sabine's whole arc on this, like the whole thing with the mom and trying to like get the validation from the mom, but you don't want to be the mom, That was pretty deep, and the fact that she was the one that helped her. I don't remember. Did she get the? No, we still had to wait for a Bo-Katan to give her the Darksaber, right? She doesn't pick it up here yet. When he, I don't remember.
I thought she picked it up at the end. I need to rewatch, but I thought
I think that might be some of the speculation for why people no longer follow Bo-Katan and the Mandalorian is because of how like the Darksaber is exchanged between them. It's not won in battle. So that's like I don't think that's ever been actually said. That's why, but it's been like fan speculation.
Yeah.
John, anything you want to add?
I was gonna say the politics of the Mandalorians is like all over the place, where you're just like, okay, there's factions here, there's the Imperial ones, okay, and then it's like a bunch of different tribes that are, their loyalties are kind of all over the place. But it is nice to get a little bit more backstory to Sabine, and also she had that thing where she built a weapon for the Empire that they were using against her people or whatever, and there's a lot of little side quests that were resolved that I feel like kind of added a little bit more depth.
Yeah. I'll admit, when it comes to Mandalore and the Clone Wars, I still to this day hate the pacifism thing. As someone who was raised on, Karen Travis, Mandalorian.
I was going to say, wow.
The more mercenary people, it just didn't work together. And God help them, the editors at the time tried to make it work between when the Clone War series was considered to be canon to Legends, but it just didn't make any sense. And I get what Lucas was doing with it. I just don't like it. But as a result of that, we get a lot of really good things that culminate into a scene like this, where we have, we've had all the things with Death Watch. We've had the pacifists learning how they need to fight back to actually, keep control of Mandalore. And then we have the Wren family versus Saxon. And as a result of this, the Galactic Civil War has changed because the Mandalorians are now going to ally with, to an extent, the rebellion. And as we've seen in The Mandalorian, that costs them a lot, as the entire planet gets glassed. Let me say it that way. All because of a moment right here. Yes. And I just think that's really well done, of connecting those two things. As much as I'll get angry at some of the things of Disney Star Wars, I like when there are connections like this, when you have someone like Filoni in charge, making sure things matter. A scene like this, we don't have The Mandalorian without this.
Right. I remember the whole drama, the whole Karen Travis. She wrote this humongous blog post and everything, and I was, for one, like, yeah, I'm worried. What are they going to do with them, with the Mandalorians, because they were just the award tribe, and they had built up through the video game and those books a pretty solid backstory for them. But it was very more stretched out, more fleshed out, and it involved them as a bigger player in the society of the galaxy, which I thought, which I didn't see coming. I thought the Mandalorians were just those crazy guys that like to kill each other on the other side of the planet. No, they played a big part in the Clone Wars and the galactic drama, which we probably could not have gotten if we stayed with that old trope of they're just a tribe of hardened killers. Yeah, I liked it. The whole kind of like closing of an era of that side with Agar Saxon's death, which is, if I did not to Google it, I should probably Google it, but wasn't he voiced by Ray Stevenson?
Who was Agar Saxon voiced by? He was voiced, or I thought I had it up here, but I guess I don't. Come on, Wiki, help me out. Ray Stevenson, yes.
So he was. Wow. Nice. Great characters. Great characters.
Okay. Well, next up on our docket, we have one of the classic characters of the Phantom Menace. The one when you saw the double-bladed lightsaber show up, you knew things were going to happen. Jedi were going to die. That, of course, being Darth Maul, who meets his end in Star Wars Rebels. And if you're out there saying, wait, Darth Maul came back to life, I thought he was sliced in half. Well, sorry, you got to catch up on your Clone Wars. And you were probably one of those people who saw Solo and say, is that like Darth Maul's brother or something? Well, Darth Maul's brother also exists, but that's something else in the Clone Wars. So would anyone like to explain how Darth Maul meets his end here?
Okay, so after a long, multi-year, obsessive hunt for Obi-Wan Kenobi, which he ended up using a Sith and Jedi holocron to kind of like seek divine guidance to find this man. His obsession to kill Kenobi. He ends up having the shortest duel in Star Wars history, and just gets ended in one samurai style anime slice by Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
So, what a way to go! I remember being kind of like disappointed that it wasn't, the Battle of Heroes or Duel of the Fates again. But when someone so obsessive gets taken down by just a fake out, and he gets taken down by philosophy pretty much, because he's so obsessive with him trying to get to Kenobi that he doesn't change. He's still the same person. He's just the same rabid person, and Kenobi is he's grown. He's not seen death, but he's seen and can change because of the deaths caused by Maul, and is able to rise up above that obsession. And I thought that was beautiful. And the part where Darth Maul questions, is he the chosen one? That was interesting, because I felt bad for him, because I saw that he knew the bigger picture, but he was just one little piece of it. And he always thought that he was going to be a bigger part of the story, a bigger part of the plan for Palpatine. But he always, he never really was. He would live in the shadow of Palpatine's plan. And I thought that was a fitting way to go.
Kevin?
Oh, it's like, I mean, same thing of like, yes, as big a fan favorite as Maul is, as much as you would want to have seen him continue and like, show up in the post or Return of the Jedi era and be like a crime lord and all this stuff, would have been great to see. But at the same time, this is such a fitting end because of all the things said there. And also you think about it of like, the reason it's called Duel of the Fates, like Dave Filoni has this big explanation of like how it is the defining moment that changes the entire galaxy, because when Qui-Gon dies, that immediately sets everything else into motion and changes. It was the father figure that Anakin needed at the time. And when he loses that, it changes everything. And as good a Jedi as Obi-Wan is at that point, I don't think he was quite ready to be a master yet. And he still had a lot. Whereas like, if it was the Obi-Wan here that had been there when Qui-Gon died and trained Anakin, it might have been a completely different story. But like, that moment changed everything. And for it to all come full circle and come back into this moment, yeah, it is such a beautiful and tragic like story here. And yes, it would have been cool to have like a big Battle of the Heroes type fight, but it's so much more fitting for him to die this way and to see that exactly like you said, Obi-Wan has grown, Maul has not. Maul has allowed vengeance to consume him, and this is the reciprocating of that. So it's a very befitting end, and then also we didn't know then, but we would get one very, very epic duel with Maul years later. Of course, in the final season of Clone Wars, which is still one of the best duels in all of Star Wars. So we got that moment years later with Ahsoka. But yeah, it's just, I mean, I loved what they did with Maul throughout. Like, it was always one of the biggest like disappointments coming out of Phantom Menace was like, oh, he was such a good villain. Why did they have to kill him off right away? And it's like, oh, there's actually many plans for him down the road. We just had to wait a while.
Yeah, my initial reaction was, that's it? That's how he dies? But then when I actually took the time to think about it, he spent how many days in a desert without water, just thriving on pure hatred.
Yep.
He's way out of shape compared to someone like Obi-Wan, who's still training, on his own and has learned how to control himself better as a Jedi. And he's so obsessed to the point he's not thinking straight. No wonder he gets taken out so easily. And it's a very beautifully animated sequence of his final fall. And then it doesn't stop there, though. Obi-Wan actually takes the time, like we've mentioned, to speak with him and attempt to give him peace. Someone who doesn't deserve it, by the way. And yet he did it anyways because he saw how much Maul was hurting. And their feud of 30-some years, ever since he murdered Qui-Gon, by the way, Obi-Wan's master, you would think if anyone had the right to not forgive, it would be him, but he extends it anyways.
Yeah.
And it's not even a total forgiveness in that sense, but it's more like, hey, I'm going to put you at peace because the chosen one exists, and he's going to bring balance to the Force. It's going to be okay. This was all worth something. Everything you suffered through was worth something.
Yeah. Oof, yeah. Yeah. He tried so hard to be more. And sorry. I think that mirrors what we as a fandom wanted Maul. We wanted more of him. But he had his place. And his place was to cause chaos for the time and to set in motions the things for Anakin that was not with him a part of it, and he could not let go of that.
Anyone else for Maul? Okay. Then we come to our final death of the night. That, of course, being Kanan Jarrus. Who wants to explain his heroic sacrifice and how this plays out in the series?
Well, I don't remember. So this was in the final season. Forget kind of what planet it is, but they're on a big mission. Essentially, there's an explosion, and it's really the only way he can save the rest of the crew by sacrificing himself, and uses all his force abilities to contain this blast. And he died, and he looks back, pretty good at hair up one more time. And it's such a gut punching moment. But this is the big Obi-Wan sacrifice type moment, and where it changes everything. But I think it was about midway through season 4, so it's toward the end of the series, but they still had a little bit to go after that without him. And actually, Evan, what you said earlier about the Grand Inquisitor's death, kind of foreshadowing, he also dies in a big explosion. It's it is amazing the parallels here, how it all set it up. And as someone, I don't know about you guys, but when I first started watching the series, I fell in love with Kanan early on because I liked this idea of someone who he never officially became a Jedi Master because he was a Padawan when Order 66 happened. He survived because of the Bad Batch, and grows up, really in chaos, and so he's not fully trained. He also falls in love, despite that being a sort of dogmatic principle of the old Jedi Order to not have a romantic entanglement. And he proves that you can still be a good Jedi and have someone you care about. I really like that about him. But he was always someone who was still trying to I think he had some imposter syndrome, and he was trying to figure out if he was worthy of training Ezra. And I just liked the humanity in him and the that part of his journey. And the sacrificial element here is just it's so well earned. But what I was saying earlier is okay, he's the master character, and there are a lot of parallels for the trilogy. I kind of figured he would die eventually. I'm glad that he was there for the majority of the series, and it wasn't midway through the season or anything like that. Midway through season 2 or something like that. They had, you get to have this whole journey with him, and also a big part is character. And part of the reason I have Kanan as my avatar for this podcast is he is one of the big disabled characters in Star Wars. He gets blinded by Maul in season 2. And that becomes a part of how he's wrestling with that, and it changes him, and I think it's very well depicted. So he's just one of my favorites. It's a heart-wrenching moment, but it's also very earned and never feels cheap. And it wasn't just he has to die because he's the mentor figure. It just worked in the story really well, and it's a big turning point for Ezra.
Evan or John?
I was gonna say it was a very It was emotional because he's kind of like the father figure of the group, kind of the leader of the group, and then the emotions of wrestling with his death after the fact, and he sacrificed himself to make sure that they survived and that their mission would go on. And it's kind of like leaving Ezra when he's not quite ready, or leaving all of them when they're not quite ready. But death happens. The stakes that were there were, it hit hard, and that's what Filoni, I think, was trying to accomplish, and also that a Jedi's death, especially in this era when there's so few of them left, is going to hit them right in the feels.
Evan?
Yeah, this is an emotional one for me. Thinking about it's very the parallels I see in my journey as a Christian, and it's huge, going from a selfish person to a selfless person, and how you interact with those you love in that way. And the idea of two things, the idea where you have to let go, kind of like what Obi-Wan taught Luke with the blast shield. It's like he lost his sight, but he can still be a part of you can still be a part of the lives of those that you care about. You can still make a significant difference. And then the fact that the scales were dropped from his eyes, as Paul says in his conversion, the fact that he was able to sacrifice himself for his others, and the realization that sometimes the best, it's tricky to word it this way because it's kind of like pro-suicide, but it is not. It's like sometimes you need to let go of some things is the best way for those people. Like, I think the Loki season 2 put it so perfectly. Like he wanted the best for his friends and his family, but what turns out was he needed to pull back a little bit from their lives. That was the best way to do it. And here he learned that he couldn't control them, and he couldn't lead them the way that the like best way that he could lead his family, which was the Ghost Crew, was to teach them that the loss of control that he was trying to have the whole time, which I thought that was a big lesson. And I have the visual like of his eyes becoming clear, like to burn into my memory since then. I was like, dang. So hopefully that makes sense, but yeah.
You put it great there. And I also would say like in addition to like the imposter syndrome he had, he's been through for a long time, he carried survivor's guilt for so long, having been, like one of the survivors of Order 66, and, his master's gone, everyone he knew. And then, and he felt like, oh, why me? Am I still here? I should have died with my friends for so long. But then when you get to this point in his journey, he is at a moment of complete peace. And like you said, he's fulfilled his journey. He's fulfilled his, and like you said, Evan, he's ready to let go. It's not like, giving up. It's more like he's reached the end of his journey. He's fulfilled, like he's found love, he's found fulfillment, and he's found this family. And he feels confident that he doesn't have to take care of them forever because they're going to be okay.
Yeah, this is the one that hurt the most going through this series, because I mean we have our crew of the Ghosts, we've got Dad and Mom with Kanan and Hera, we've got the quirky younger sister, maybe even slightly older sister in Sabine, we've got the big brute of an older brother in Zeb, and we've got poor Ezra as like the younger brother, and Chopper as our homicidal pet. It's a family that came together from very different places, and then to lose a part of that is like losing a limb. And his death impacts the series. I mean, even up to the day of Ahsoka, as that's come out. Like, we don't have what happens there without this sacrifice.
Yeah.
And him coming to the realization that, I'm not worthless. I didn't just survive through a fluke of fate or anything. Like, I'm here for a purpose, and and not just one purpose, the many purposes I've had along the way, the many lives I helped save, the relationships I built with people, and doesn't know it, but he's going to be a father in a little bit. And as a result of that, he makes the sacrifice play, not because it's like, yep, it's time to die. That's what I want to do. Like, no, it's better for these people here if I use all of my energy focused on this task to save them, even though it's going to cost me everything. And then he's gone. And it, like I said, it hurts, but without this, we don't have the end of the series. And in fact, guys, our bonus question for this episode for our Captivated Patreon supporters is going to be, if it were possible, what would have happened if Ezra had saved him in the world between worlds? So we'll work on that as a premise for our bonus question. But we have that moment later on in the series where Ezra has the same moment he has to try and save Ahsoka that he does for Kanan, and yet he doesn't. And which one mattered? How could he choose one and not the other? Well, we'll get into that later on. But yeah, this is a Star Wars play right here. Yeah. And I love, this is what being a Jedi is all about, making the play to save lives.
Yeah.
Even if it costs you.
And I had a moment watching The Rise of Skywalker when a Kanan's voice shows up. Me and the guy next to me, I didn't know I didn't know him, but we both did a fist bump when we heard Kanan's voice. I was like, yeah.
Nice.
Right on.
All right. Anything else before we wrap up today?
Star Wars Rebels. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Absolutely. This was a ton of fun. Hey, guys, if there's a death out there we didn't cover, because guess what? There's more, and you really wanted us to do it, hey, let us know. We're open to it. Send them in the comments down below or email us at systematicecology@gmail.com. But before we do all that, you gentlemen, do you have any recommendations for the audience?
They're a little hard to...
What's that?
I would say they're hard to find, but I still have the Force Unleashed graphic novels, like back when Dark Horse was on. So if you can get you can probably get some on eBay or something like that. But like those and the novels, I really like the Force Unleashed. All that was back when I was still playing video games, and the games are great. It's just a really cool story, but and I know they've like done stuff sort of with that era since then in Disney, but if you go back and hunt down some of the original stories, they're a lot of fun.
They had a blind master in that game too.
Yeah,
and you had that was a interesting connection. But does it have to be Star Wars related? It
does not have to be. It could be anything. Literally anything.
And despite the name of being brain rot, the Skibidi Toilet series is beautiful. It's a masterpiece. It is so bad, but it's so good. and it's and I'm so excited that Michael Bay is gonna make a film or some sort of series or something, because it's like the most Michael Bay thing you could ever see, but it's good. It's like a Band of Brothers, but in like 1 minute clips of weird robots fighting toilets.
Fair enough.
There you go.
John.
I'm trying to remember, there's a new Lego Star Wars series on Disney Plus that's really fun. Kills me. I can't remember the name of it.
Rebuild the Galaxy.
Yeah.
All right. Me, on the other hand, I just found out that Pluto TV has a Universal Monsters channel the other night. So I watched Creature from the Black Lagoon, and I had a heck of a time. Love those movies. I'm a complete and utter sucker for them. So, guys, thank you for what you do for listening to this episode. Please, if you get a chance, leave a 5-star review in your podcasting platform of choice, or a comment down below if you're listening to this on YouTube, or watching this on YouTube, I should say. You can also send us episode topic ideas. You can send us questions as well. Since you got us to over 100 subscribers on YouTube, we're going to do a special Q&A session at some point in time in the future where we have all your questions compiled, and as many hosts as possible will join to answer your questions. Now, that's where I'd like to shout out some supporters. Thank you very much. Ethan Overcash, Austin Nance, Amber Riley, and Jonathan Augustine. You guys are the best. But remember, we're all the chosen people, a geekdom of priests. Did you know Systematic Ecology has a YouTube channel? Now you do. And while you're there, you can see exclusive stuff like our comic book catch-up series, Manga Mustard, Drinks with Tejas, the companion series to our annual theme. You can go Friday Night Frights with me, where I go through cryptozoology, ufology, and more. You can also go to see Spidey Swing-Bys, where I'm doing every chronological appearance by release of Spider-Man from Amazing Fantasy 15 all the way to the modern age. You can also find exclusive shorts on YouTube there, as well as other bonuses for extra episodes that we do that don't end up on the podcast proper. So I want to see you over there on YouTube.
Be sure to check out other Anazal Ministry Podcast AMP Network shows. You can see the whole network in a single feed if you're on Spotify, or you could go to Apple Podcasts and find the Anazal Ministries Network podcast, the AMP Network. Yeah, there's just a network on Apple. You can follow the whole thing. You'll get shows like The Homily, where Pastor Will goes through his homily messages. It's literally just Pastor Will's sermons, guys. It's great. You also get access to the Whole Church podcast, where TJ and myself interview leaders from across different denominations and backgrounds to work towards a more full church unity. You can see My Seminary Life, where Brandon Knight discusses his experiences at seminary and then discusses seminary topics, so anyone can have access to knowledge available to seminary students. You also can see Let Nothing Move You over there, where Christian Ashley goes through the Bible in a Bible study type fashion and explains the whole biblical narrative. I also have a show on there, The Dummy for Theology, where we discuss various theological topics in an attempt to show every side of the discussions, leaving you with more questions than answers. There's also The Bible After Hours, where the foul-mouthed preacher goes through the Bible from a more progressive view to challenge the status quo of the modern church. Finally, you can hear The Clydes, where Taylor and Elizabeth Clyde go through weekly discussions in a devotional conversational style method to help us all get closer to one another and to God.